Hello, good evening, and welcome back. So the COVID rules have been tightened across England, Scotland, and Wales. And we must remember that although there is fear about the virus, it is not coronavirus or COVID-19 that is causing these restrictions. It is not at all the COOF or the CCP virus that is causing us to have to be alone at Christmas or at any other time. It is not at all the fear of having the sniffles that is stopping us from seeing our family. It is instead the government, the so-called conservative right-wing government, that is causing this. So yes, by all means, be aggravated with the CCP for having this being let out of their country at the same time as they were trying to buy protective equipment for their own citizens and to placate their own businesses. But of course, remember that we would not have this problem if we were to have hard borders, and we only have this problem because the government enforces lockdowns. This is not the virus's fault. We cannot blame this on an inhuman foreign threat. If you wish to blame it on a foreign threat, blame it on the CCP. If you do not wish to blame it on a foreign threat, then blame it on the Conservative government. And honestly, it really is that simple, because they are the ones who are saying that you are not allowed to see your family. If your family live in a tier 4 restriction, as in London or the South East, then you are not allowed to see them. That is not the fault of the virus. It is the fault of the Conservative government. And as these new restrictions are being put in place that the monarch said would not happen, then of course you've got to think, oh, yet again, the government has either lied or they flip-flopped. Either way, they are not a reliable source of information or idea of what will happen. And therefore, you can no longer trust what they say. And that is, of course, very disheartening for myself and perhaps quite a few others of you to think that, the Conservative government is not a reliable party. But I, for one, will not be supporting them again in the future. And in the last election, I in fact did vote for the Brexit party instead. But then again, being in Manchester, it makes no bloody difference whatsoever. And I would do the same in the future, whether that be the Reform Party or the Reclaim Party. We will have to see when the time comes. But the Conservatives, with Boris Johnson, Bojo the Clown, and Matt Halfcock, they've definitely pissed me off far too much, and I will not be supporting them. But to think they can say, yeah, you can't see your family, we're going to quarantine London, we're going to give you stay-at-home orders, and you aren't allowed to leave the country. And what point do we say you're taking this a bit far? Because you might remember, at the start of the lockdown, it was 2 weeks to flatten the curve. And also, you might be thinking, well, hey, isn't there the anti-tax argument, which is, I shouldn't have to pay tax because that goes against the non-aggression principle. And then the response is, well, hey, if you want to go outside, then you're using services of which tax pays for. And it's not as if the government can give you a stay-at-home order and force you to just stay inside. And yet they're doing that. It has become the point where parody of law is impossible. Yeah, parody of feminists and critical race theorists was impossible a few months ago, maybe a year or two ago. But now, it is impossible to parody the law. And that is where things get incredibly serious. So yes, we will of course see protests and riots, as we already have done. And we will see them even more so. And the only way the politicians will bloody well listen is if their own life is threatened. And I do not give a shit about Boris Johnson's girlfriend. She was not voted in. We do not care about Carrie Symonds. She can think whatever the fuck she wants to think about. That is not who has been supported. We voted for the Conservatives, for the Conservative values. We voted against Labour and against communism and against government interference and intrusion and overreach. And yet, Bojo, the clown, has decided, actually, we're going to enforce left-wing's agendas. We're going to support Corbyn in all his endeavours and put in place his policies. What is the bloody point of a democracy if you do not respect the will of the voters? And then what the fuck is going on with Brexit when it comes to saying, well, we have to have a decision by now, otherwise we're leaving with no deal. Oh, look at that, we're going to extend it yet again for the infinite time. Again and again and again and again and again, and time again, there are postponements, there are delays for whatever fucking excuse they wish to create to Brexit as well. The Conservative government has been a complete disaster and failure and disappointment. We do not agree with this. This is not why Bozo the Clown was voted in. So either get your fucking act together or fuck right off. It really is that simple. If Joe Biden is going to steal the election in the US, then we're completely fucked if Bozo ain't going to get his act together. And it really is as simple as that at the end of the day. He's either going to say we're going to lead the charge for the world as this tiny rock in the Atlantic Ocean, or he's going to say we're going to roll over, expose our bellies, and China can just fucking take us for all we've got. So which is it? And again, Carrie Symonds, I'm sure she's a lovely partner, a lovely lady to Bozo, but she is not the Prime Minister of the UK. She might have some nice ideas, but view them with skepticism, for fuck's sake, Bozo. Just because you love her and you're with her, it does not mean that she's correct. It does not mean that she has all the answers. So maybe think instead to the policies and the values of your party and enact them. You've had COVID, you suffered, we sympathise, we wished you well, and now you're better. Bloody good. Do not push your own fears upon the rest of us. Because what they're saying now is that despite promising that the restrictions would not be changed over Christmas, they have been. Instead of 23rd to 27th of December, having a couple of other households with you, no, now it's just Christmas Day for one other household. So fuck off. And I sincerely hope that police forces around the country will choose to not enforce this policy. To go, well, hey, we understand the importance of Christmas, and it is actually instead up to the own individuals if they wish to put themselves at that risk. At this point, everybody has been bloody well swamped with too much COVID information that if they wish to take that risk, they should be entitled to do so. You may very well war your information campaign, and you can do that as much as you bloody well wish. But it is information at the end of the day, which means it is down to the individual to make their own decision. It is not down to you to enforce things by edict as to what we are or are not allowed to do. But yes, just think about this then. London in Tier 4, which means stay-at-home orders, which means a 32-borough citywide lockdown. There is a virus. Everybody is being quarantined. You cannot leave the city. And it is thankfully down to the government with their curfews and lack of visiting that you are still able to survive and so-called thrive, which is of course utter bullshit. Now, am I describing real life or am I describing V for Vendetta? Because at this point, there is absolutely no difference. Sure, the names of the leaders might change. It might be Chancellor instead of Prime Minister. But the same policies have been enacted. And if JFK said, of course, that if you make peaceful protests impossible, then you make violent revolution inevitable. And that is what is being faced here. This is not a threat, it is a promise, it is a fact of life. That if they decide to continue to decide, well, your business is not essential, and instead we wish to maintain the biggest wealth transfer in history, where in America, for example, a third of the entirety of US dollars in existence have been printed in the last 10 months. And the same goes in the UK. And where is that money bloody well going? Well, of course it is going to the few businesses that are still allowed to operate, not the small businesses, which are the backbone of this bloody country. How did the big businesses get so big? Because they started off at small businesses. And it seems as if this bloody government has forgotten that. It has forgotten where we have come from. By all means, you may wish to forget British history and think it is racist and full of slaves, but then you're also forgetting the policies, the philosophies that made this country so bloody great and what made it what it is today. And of course, we are now just relying on the Victorian era. We are relying on their infrastructure and their ideas and their philosophy, and that is slowly waning. And we are running out of new ideas because they don't bloody well allow it. Anybody with anything worthwhile is just given red tape instead of encouragement. They are not allowed to pursue things that are worthwhile for the rest of us. And they're just being told to fuck off and try it elsewhere. And of course, therefore, we are falling behind. We are going towards quantitative easing instead. And yet, the bloody marvellous ideas were here just over 100 years ago. They had it right. How the fuck have we lost it over 100 years? In other countries, of course, during the Second World War, they had blitzes like we had on London, but they were more effective so that they had to rebuild their infrastructure after the Second World War with more people in mind. We, on the other hand, did not, and were still relying on Victorians. Maybe we should have built Brunel's wide gauge train tracks. At that point, we would have, of course, had double-decker trains and been able to escort larger cargo. And then it wouldn't be so bad, but we fucking well didn't. In which case, we're in this bloody position that we are now. And then when it comes to Victorians' ideas for high-speed rail, maybe we should be using their ideas instead of this newfangled HS2, which isn't supposed to disrupt anybody and is therefore costing a fuckload more than it should do. Yeah, on the whole, the Victorians had the better idea. And you might think, oh, they were a bit mean and a bit too enforceful in their ideas. Yeah, but it bloody well worked. And so, I doubt you're surprised. The people who thought maybe there was a moderate solution to this, maybe going centre-right would be good enough, or being centrist could get the job done, and they're realising, well, it bloody well isn't, is it? At this point, as far as I'm concerned, patriotic alternative pretty much is the only bloody alternative. Because that really is about it. What's the fucking point in voting for Conservatives if they're just going to enact Labour's policies anyway? Where on earth is the right-wing party? It seems to only be patriotic alternative, and you may very well disagree with them on some points. But they still seem to be the best option. And hey, if we can move the window further over to the right, then at that point you can have your squabbles. But at this point, it seems to just be a battle for the country, and this is where we stand. So yes, Mark Collette, I may have some disagreements with you, and if we were to have a conversation, it may take a few hours or a few days or a few weeks or even months to iron out the disagreements that we have, if you should have that much time for me. But your party does seem to be the best bet at the minute. And I'm not saying that as a proud PA member, but I'm saying that as a realist and understanding what it takes. And if the so-called Conservatives wish to actually enforce their bullshit Christmas COVID rules, then yes, I would most certainly say patriotic alternative seems to be the only alternative. And that's where we stand. So I'm sorry to be a bit black-pilling today, but I think the Conservatives can only let you down so much before you think, what the fuck is going on? And that isn't even mentioning the new strain of the virus, although of course there have been, according to this analysis by Nick Triggle, thousands of strains of this virus. But then of course this one is being more of a concern, being 70% more infectious. And the vaccination might not work, but we're presuming that it will. But if it is so bad, then it seems the vaccination doesn't work, in which case there's no point in the bloody lockdowns, because you're always going to need them, in which case your country is not going to function. You seem to have forgotten that. You seem to think that you can print to your heart's content. Where the fuck have the Conservatives gone? But that is where things stand. And if Bill Gates loves this vaccination so much, he can take my place in the queue. Please do. You've done so much getting this vaccination into circulation that you deserve it before me. So go ahead, you septuagenarian high-risk category group you. You've earned it. You take it. Go ahead, and I'll hang back. But I guess having personal choice about vaccinations is too much of a privilege at this point, instead of, of course, it being a human right, that nobody can inject you with something that you do not wish to be injected with. But, hey, as always, let me know what you guys think down below. I'm always intrigued to hear what you guys have to say. And until next time, as always, have a good one.